The year was 1453, a moment that would mark not only the end of a city, but the collapse of an empire that had stood for over 1,000 years. Constantinople, the jewel of Byzantium, the last bastion of the Eastern Roman Empire, was under siege by an unstoppable force led by Sultan Mehmed II, a ruler whose ambition and military genius had reshaped the world. For centuries, Constantinople had been a symbol of imperial power, wealth, and the enduring spirit of Christianity in the East. Its massive walls, considered nearly impregnable, had withstood countless attacks, including sieges by Persians, Arabs, and even Crusaders. Yet, in the spring of 1453, these legendary fortifications faced their ultimate test. From the moment Mehmed II ascended the Ottoman throne in 1451, he set his sights on Constantinople. The young sultan, only 21 years old at the time, understood that the city was more than a political prize. It was the key to consolidating Ottoman power in the region and legitimizing his rule in the eyes of both his subjects and rivals. Mehmed invested heavily in modernizing his army and artillery, commissioning massive cannons capable of breaching walls that had seemed eternal. The Ottoman forces he assembled were unprecedented in scale and discipline, comprising tens of thousands of soldiers, elite janissaries, and auxiliary troops from across the empire. This was no ordinary siege. It was a meticulously planned operation that combined strategy, technology, and psychological warfare. Inside Constantinople, the mood was grim. Emperor Constantine, the 11th Palaiologos, the last Byzantine ruler, faced a hopeless struggle against the overwhelming Ottoman army. Despite being outnumbered, the Byzantines displayed remarkable resilience, manning the walls with soldiers, citizens, and even clergy determined to defend their city to the last. Food and resources were dwindling, the population exhausted from months of tension and minor skirmishes, and morale fragile. The citizens of Constantinople, who had lived through decades of decline and uncertainty, now confronted the terrifying reality that their home, the center of their world, might fall. The siege began in earnest on April 6, 1453. Ottoman forces surrounded the city, cutting off supply lines and bombarding its walls with cannon fire. Mehmed II understood the psychological aspect of siege warfare and sought to wear down the defenders' will. For weeks, the city endured relentless assaults. Massive cannonballs tore through the ancient stone fortifications, shattering towers that had stood for centuries. The Byzantines responded with courage, repairing breaches and repelling attacks, but each day brought them closer to collapse. The air was thick with smoke, the ground trembled under bombardments, and the cries of the wounded filled the streets. A city under siege became a living nightmare. In those fateful weeks, the fate of the royal family became increasingly precarious. Emperor Constantine XI moved his court into the inner fortress of the city, a place where even the walls might not protect them forever. Among those present was Princess Theodora, a young woman, and born into a lineage that traced its roots to Roman emperors and noble Byzantine families. Theodora's life, until this point, had been one of privilege and ceremonial grandeur, shielded from the harsh realities of warfare by palace walls and attendants. Now, she found herself witnessing the destruction of everything she had known. From the palace windows she could see the Ottoman encampments, retching endlessly across the horizon. The constant march of soldiers, the glint of armor in the sun, and the ominous silhouettes of siege engines that would soon crush the city's defenses. Even in the face of inevitable doom, the Byzantines did not surrender. Emperor Constantine XI led sorties against Ottoman positions, rallied his troops, and refused to abandon his city. The defenders' bravery, however, could not match the technological and numerical superiority of Mehmed's forces. One of the decisive factors in the siege was the deployment of massive cannons, including the legendary Basilica cannon, which hurled enormous stone balls with terrifying force. Each bombardment chipped away at the walls, creating breaches that no human effort could indefinitely repair. With every thunderous impact, the sense of despair inside Constantinople grew, and hope waned. On May 29, 1453, the inevitable occurred. After nearly 2 months of siege, the Ottomans launched a final all-out assault. The defenders fought valiantly, but the breaches were too many, the walls too weak, and the Ottoman forces too vast. The city fell, and with it, the Eastern Roman Empire ceased to exist. Emperor Constantine reportedly cast aside his imperial regalia and joined the fight on the walls, meeting his end with the courage for which he had long been admired. Constantinople, the city that had withstood centuries of invasions, finally succumbed to the relentless power of Mehmed II. For the inhabitants of Constantinople, the aftermath was a time of terror and confusion. Streets that had once echoed "we." The rhythms of daily life became scenes of chaos. Looting, massacres, and the capture of citizens were common as Ottoman forces secured control. Families were torn apart, treasures plundered, and centuries of art, manuscripts, and culture were threatened with destruction. Among those most affected was the imperial family, whose members faced an uncertain fate under the victorious Sultan. Princess Theodora, though young and relatively protected by her royal status, could not escape the reality that she was now a prisoner in the very city that had been her home. The fall of Constantinople did not merely signify a military victory, it represented a profound cultural and political shift. The Eastern Roman Empire, a remnant of the ancient Roman world, vanished from the map. The Ottomans' soul edified their presence as a dominant power bridging Europe and Asia, and Sultan Mehmed II earned the title conqueror for his triumph. For the surviving Byzantines, especially the royal family, it was a turning point from which there would be no return, a transition from sovereign rulers to captives in a court that had once been their enemy. Princess Theodora's story begins precisely in this moment of catastrophe. She emerged from the shadows of a fallen empire into the uncertain hands of a conqueror whose ambitions were as vast as the city he had seized. The fall of Constantinople was not just a historical event, it was a personal tragedy for countless individuals who had lived their entire lives within the city's protective walls. For Theodora, the consequences would be life-altering. Setting the stage for a chapter defined by captivity, political maneuvering, and the intricate interplay between conqueror and captive. As the smoke cleared and the city settled under Ottoman rule, the once mighty bastions of Byzantine culture and power became symbols of conquest. Theodora's privileged world was gone, replaced by the reality of subjugation and survival. What Mehmed II would decide. For her next would not only shape her life, but also reflect the broader strategy of an empire expanding at the cost of centuries-old civilizations. In the shadow of Constantinople's fallen walls, a young princess faced the uncertain and often dangerous hands of history. The fall of Constantinople marked not just the end of an empire, but the abrupt and terrifying upheaval of countless lives, among them that of Princess Theodora. Born into one of Byzantium's most illustrious lineages, Theodora had lived her early life surrounded by marble halls, sacred icons, and a court steeped in tradition and ceremony. She had been raised to embody the grace, dignity, and refinement expected of a princess in a city that considered itself the inheritor of Rome itself. But in May of 1453, all of this vanished. In the smoke and ruin of a city under siege, the palace, which had once been a sanctuary, became a trap. The walls that had sheltered her since birth could no longer protect her from the armies of Sultan Mehmed II. As the Ottoman forces breached Constantinople's walls during the climactic assault on May 29th, chaos consumed the streets. Citizens fled, families were torn apart, and the city's deaf. Enders fell in waves to the overwhelming military might of the Ottoman army. Amid this turmoil, the Byzantine court scrambled to protect what remained of its members, attempting to hide women and children in secure chambers, monasteries, or the more defensible parts of the palace. But the Ottoman army, disciplined and experienced in the art of siege and conquest, penetrated these inner sanctums with terrifying efficiency. Princess Theodora, only in her late teens or early 20s at the time, found herself caught in this maelstrom. Accounts of the period suggest that the Sultan was particularly interested in capturing high-ranking members of the Byzantine nobility, both for their symbolic value and for practical political purposes. Members of the imperial family were treated not merely as prisoners but as tools, either to be leveraged in diplomacy, displayed as trophies of conquest, or assimilated into the Ottoman court to strengthen the Sultan's image as the ultimate victor. In this environment, Theodora's fate shifted from that of a protected royal to a captive of a powerful and calculating conqueror. The capture itself was likely sudden and terrifying. Witnesses from similar ages describe how soldiers would move swiftly through the palace, seizing those of noble birth before they could flee. Theodora may have been escorted by guards, restrained, or even separated from her attendants. In one moment, she was a princess in a secure palace. In the next, she was a prisoner in an alien city under the control of a ruler she had never met. The psychological impact of this sudden transition cannot be overstated. For someone who had grown up in the ceremonial splendor of Byzantium, the very streets of Constantinople, once familiar, had become treacherous. Each step outside the palace walls exposed her to the unknown whims of conquerors, soldiers, and the chaos of a city in turmoil. Prison conditions for captured Byzantine royalty were paradoxically complex. While the Sultan could have executed high-ranking captives to remove any threat of rebellion, Mehmed II was politically astute. He recognized the value of keeping key figures alive. Princess Theodora, by virtue of her status, was a valuable asset. She could be married off to cement alliances, used as a bargaining chip with European powers, or integrated into the Ottoman court in ways that symbolized both conquest and legitimacy. Theodora's imprisonment was not in a dark dungeon-like cell as one might imagine. It is likely she was placed under guarded confinement in one of the palace complexes now controlled by the Ottomans, a location designed to both protect her from harm and restrict her freedom. Life in captivity was a harsh contrast to the opulence she had known. Theodora would have been under constant surveillance, her movements and interactions controlled. The psychological toll of confinement, coupled with the uncertainty of her fate, would have weighed heavily. Reports from contemporaneous sources often describe captives in such situations experiencing profound anxiety, a loss of agency, and a sense of dislocation. Theodora, accustomed to being a participant in courtly life, now stead in a liminal space, neither free nor fully integrated into her captor's world. Every interaction, every gesture, could be scrutinized for loyalty, obedience, or usefulness. Yet even in captivity, Theodora's identity as a princess could not be erased. Her noble lineage, her education, and her cultural refinement made her both recognizable and influential, even as a prisoner. She represented a link to the Byzantine past, a living testament to the empire that Mehmed II had conquered. For the Sultan, her capture was a symbolic victory, proof that even the most prestigious bloodlines could be subdued. Theodora's presence in the Ottoman court would have sent a clear message to the world. The Byzantine Empire was no more, and the Ottomans now held the reins of power in the region. Historical accounts provide glimpses of how the Sultan treated female captives like Theodora. Ottoman chroniclers note that high-ranking women were often given positions within the palace hierarchy, though never with the freedoms they had once enjoyed. They might be placed in quarters with other captives, their daily routines tightly regulated, and their interactions with outsiders monitored. Religious and cultural considerations also came into play. The Ottoman court was Islamic, while Theodora was a Christian. While forced conversion was sometimes pursued, it was not immediate, leaving captives in a tense state of cultural and spiritual liminality. For Theodora, each day in captivity would have required navigating the delicate balance between obedience, dignity, and survival. Theodora's personal experience of captivity was intertwined with the broader trauma of Constantinople's fall. She would have witnessed the destruction of familiar landmarks, the desecration of churches, and the dispersal of her family and court. The loss was not merely material, it was existential. Her role, once central in a thriving empire, had been reduced to that of a pawn in a game controlled entirely by the Ottomans. Yet her position as a royal captive also meant she retained potential power should circumstances shift. Marriages, alliances, and political maneuvering could transform a prisoner into a participant in the Sultan's vision, a possibility that would shape her later experiences. Amid the uncertainty, Theodora's resilience would have been tested. She had to adapt to life under constant supervision, learn the customs and expectations of her captors, and negotiate the perilous dynamics of a court where her very existence was both valued and controlled. Letters, chroniclers, and historical reconstructions suggest that women of her status often developed sophisticated strategies to survive, demonstrating loyalty without submission, maintaining dignity without provocation, and cultivating relationships that could offer protection or leverage. For Theodora, every day in captivity was a calculated exercise in endurance and diplomacy. Ultimately, the capture of Princess Theodora symbolizes the human cost of conquest. Beyond the fall of walls and the reshaping of empires, it underscores the vulnerability of individuals caught in the tides of history. Her story is not merely one of loss, but of survival in the face of overwhelming change. From palace corridors adorned with gold and icons, she was thrust into confinement, her fate determined by the strategic ambitions of Sultan Mehmed II. The transition from princess to captive marked a turning point, not only for her life, but for the legacy of the Byzantine Empire itself. Theodora's journey from palace to prison set the stage for the next chapter of her life, her interactions with Mehmed II, and her navigation of the complex political and personal dynamics of the Ottoman court. It was in these moments that the full scope of the Sultan's vision and the precariousness of her position became clear. As history would show, captivity was not the end, but the beginning of a story defined by power, survival, and the difficult choice imposed by a world reshaped by conquest. The capture of Constantinople in 1453 marked a monumental shift in the political landscape of the Eastern Mediterranean, and with it came the integration of its most prominent captives, including Princess Theodora, into the orbit of Sultan Mehmed II's court. For Mehmed II, the fall of the Byzantine capital was not just a military victory, it was the beginning of a calculated plan to consolidate power, legitimize Ottoman rule, and project the authority of the Sultan across newly conquered lands. The court he presided over was not merely a residence, it was a center of governance, intrigue, and diplomacy, where every gesture, every introduction, and every alliance carried profound political significance. The Ottoman court of Mehmed II was a complex and meticulously organized institution, reflecting the dual necessities of statecraft and imperial grandeur. Unlike the relatively small Byzantine court that had survived centuries of decline, Mehmed's court was a sprawling hub of administrative, military, and ceremonial activity. Officials, advisors, military commanders, and foreign envoys all interacted within this intricate web, each performing a specific function in service of the Sultan's vision. The court served not only to govern the empire, but to impress upon visitors and captives alike the overwhelming power and sophistication of the Ottoman state. For captives like Theodora, entering this environment was akin to stepping into a foreign universe governed by rules that were both subtle and absolute. Sultan Mehmed II himself was a figure of remarkable ambition and intellect. Known as Mehmed the Conqueror, he had ascended the throne at the age of 12 and had already displayed a remarkable combination of military prowess, administrative skill, and diplomatic acumen. By the time Constantinople fell, he had meticulously planned the siege, amassed a modernized army, and employed artillery in ways that would redefine siege warfare for centuries. But beyond the battlefield, Mehmed's strategies extended into governance and court diplomacy. Captives of noble birth were not simply detained, they were carefully evaluated for their political and symbolic value. Princess Theodora, as a member of the fallen Byzantine imperial family, represented a potent symbol. She was both a living reminder of a defeated empire and a potential instrument of influence. Within Mehmed's court, the treatment of captives like Theodora was strategic. High-ranking prisoners were often placed in quarters that were neither fully private nor entirely public, ensuring both their safety and their subjugation. Their daily routines were strictly controlled, from meals to interactions with courtiers, reflecting a careful balance between respect for IR status and the assertion of Ottoman dominance. The court functioned as both a palace and a laboratory of politics, where individuals were constantly observed, alliances assessed, and loyalty tested. Every movement or expression could be interpreted as a potential political message, and Theodora, despite her youth, would have been acutely aware of the stakes. The inclusion of captured royals. The Ottoman court served multiple purposes. Firstly, it reinforced the Sultan's image as the supreme victor of the Byzantine Empire. Displaying Theodora and other nobles within the court demonstrated the Sultan's complete authority over his newly conquered territories. Secondly, it provided opportunities for diplomacy and negotiation. High-ranking captives could be used as bargaining tools with foreign powers or as intermediaries in the delicate dance of regional politics. Finally, their presence allowed the Sultan to manage potential threats. By keeping potential claimants to Byzantine authority close under supervision, Mehmed minimized the risk of rebellion while maintaining leverage over Christian subjects both within Constantinople and beyond. Princess Theodora's specific position, within this structure, was influenced by her lineage and the Sultan's broader political considerations. She was recognized not merely as a young woman of noble birth, but as a living embodiment of Byzantine legitimacy. Marrying her into the Ottoman court or using her as a diplomatic instrument would allow Mehmed to project an image of magnanimity and cultural sophistication. At the same time, her captivity served as a reminder to the people of Constantinople and to European powers that the Ottoman Empire was now the dominant force in the region. Every day in the court reinforced the message the old order had been replaced and Sultan Mehmed's authority was absolute. Religion and cultural identity played a critical role in the dynamics of the court. Theodora, a Christian raised in the tradit ions of Eastern Orthodoxy, now found herself in an Islamic court governed by Ottoman norms. While the Ottomans were pragmatic rulers who often allowed religious communities some autonomy under the millet system, individuals of prominence, especially captives, were expected to navigate cultural and religious differences carefully. For Theodora, this meant understanding the protocols, etiquette, and expectations of her captors, all while maintaining her own dignity and negotiating the possibility of influence or protection. Any misstep could be interpreted as defiance, yet complete submission would diminish her value as a political asset. Mehmed's court was also a place of immense intellectual and cultural activity. Scholars, poets, artists, and architects flourished under his patronage. The Sultan encouraged the study of science, literature, and philosophy, blending traditional Islamic learning with the knowledge and artistic heritage of conquered peoples. For Theodora, this environment would have been both alien and fascinating. Surrounded by the grandeur of Ottoman ceremonial life, she would have been exposed to new forms of architecture, courtly ritual, and scholarly discourse, of which underscored the Sultan's vision of himself as not merely a warrior but a ruler of a sophisticated, cosmopolitan empire. Interactions with Mehmed II himself were likely formal, deliberate, and charged with political significance. As a ruler, he understood the power of perception. Treating Theodora with a measured combination of courtesy and authority would signal to both her and the court that she was respected yet ultimately under his control. Historical accounts suggest that Mehmed was both charismatic and pragmatic, capable of balancing severity with diplomacy. For Theodora, Each meeting would have been a high-stakes encounter, a test of composure, intelligence, and adaptability. The dynamics between captor and captive in such contexts were rarely simple. They involved negotiation of power, perception, and survival on multiple levels. The court's diplomatic function extended beyond its walls. Envoys from neighboring states, including Venice, Genoa, and other European powers, often visited Constantinople shortly after its capture, seeking to gauge the intentions of the new ruler. The presence of Byzantine captives like Theodora would have sent a clear message. Mehmed II had conquered the city decisively and now controlled its political and symbolic capital. Their display was as much a tool of statecraft as it was a statement of dominance. By incorporating Theodora into the court, Mehmed reinforced the perception of Ottoman authority and sophistication, demonstrating that he could manage both conquest and governance with calculated precision. In essence, Sultan Mehmed II's court was a carefully orchestrated environment where power, diplomacy, and personal relationships intersected. Captives like Princess Theodora occupied a unique and delicate position within this structure. They were simultaneously symbols of conquest, instruments of political strategy, and potential participants in the court's intricate web of influence. For Theodora, survival required acute awareness, adaptability, and the ability to navigate the complex interplay of culture, religion, and politics. Her captivity was far from passive. It was a dynamic and perilous negotiation, one that would shape not only her life, but also her legacy as a representative of the fallen Byzantine Empire. Theodora's experience in Mehmed's court reveals the nuanced ways in which power was exercised in the aftermath of conquest. Captivity was not merely imprisonment, it was a political and cultural arena in which the Sultan's authority was asserted and reinforced. Every action, from the ceremonial treatment of prisoners to their integration into daily court life, was imbued with strategic intent. For Theodora, understanding and maneuvering within this environment became essential to her survival and to maintaining the dignity and influence she still possessed despite the fall of her empire. Ultimately, Mehmed II's court exemplified the calculated blend of force, diplomacy, and cultural management that defined his rule. For Princess Theodora, it was the stage upon which the next chapter of her life would unfold, a chapter characterized by uncertainty, negotiation, and the constant balancing of power and survival. The court, with its grandeur and danger, symbolized the stark contrast between the world she had lost and the one she was forced to inhabit. Here, in the heart of the Ottoman Empire, she would learn that the art of survival often required as much skill and intelligence as the art of ruling. After the fall of Constantinople and her capture, Princess Theodora faced a future shrouded in uncertainty as her fate became intertwined with the political and personal ambitions of Sultan Mehmed II. For many captives in the Ottoman court, especially those of noble birth, life was defined not only by survival, but by the strategic choices of their conqueror. Mehmed II, renowned for high intelligence, pragmatism, and political acumen, treated high-ranking captives not as mere prisoners, but as instruments to achieve broader diplomatic and social objectives. For Theodora, this meant that her next moves, whether forced marriage, conversion, or ceremonial integration into the court, were dictated by considerations far larger than her personal will. Forced marriage was a common tool used by rulers of the time to consolidate power and legitimize new regimes. By marrying a princess of a conquered dynasty, a ruler could symbolically unite the old and new orders, presenting a narrative of continuity while asserting dominance. In Mehmed II's case, Princess Theodora's lineage as a member of the Byzantine imperial family made her an exceptionally valuable candidate. A marriage would not only integrate her into the Ottoman elite, but also serve as a clear signal to both domestic and foreign observers that the Byzantine legacy was now under the Sultan's control. Such a union would demonstrate both political savvy and the ability to absorb prestige from a conquered civilization. However, historical records are unclear and often contradictory regarding what Mehmed II actually did. Ideed for Theodora. Some chroniclers suggest that she may have been considered for a politically strategic marriage, perhaps to one of Mehmed's trusted commanders or family members, thereby ensuring her loyalty and embedding her within the Ottoman elite. Such an arrangement would have been consistent with Mehmed's broader strategies, as he often used marriage and alliances to secure the loyalty of key figures from conquered territories. Other sources, however, hint that she may have been allowed to retain a degree of independence, perhaps as a respected guest within the palace, rather than being immediately married off. This ambiguity reflects the broader difficulty of reconstructing the precise experiences of high-ranking captives during this era. Regardless of the specifics, the pressure placed upon Theodora were immense. As a young woman in a foreign court, she was expected to navigate a complex web of social, cultural, and religious expectations. Conversion to Islam was sometimes pursued for captive women, both to integrate them fully into the Ottoman hierarchy and to align them with the dominant faith of the court. However, Mehmed II was also pragmatic and politically astute. He may have deferred any religious imposition, understanding that forcing a young princess to convert immediately could provoke unrest among Christian subjects or complicate potential diplomatic negotiations. Theodora's position, therefore, was precarious and ambiguous. She existed in a liminal space where political strategy and personal survival were inseparable, the potential for marriage or diplomatic use was compounded by her symbolic importance. Mehmed II understood that Theodora was more than a captive. She was a living emblem of a fallen empire. Any decision regarding her fate would reverberate across Europe, influencing both allies and adversaries. A marriage could be portrayed as a sign of Ottoman magnanimity, showing that the Sultan treated his former enemies with respect and incorporated them into his court. Conversely, mistreatment or dismissal could be used by rivals to critique his rule or rally support against Ottoman expansion. Theodora, in this context, was simultaneously a pawn and a highly valuable asset, a situation that placed her at the center of a delicate and often dangerous political calculus. Historical speculation also suggests that Mehmed II may have used Theodora in negotiations with European powers. Princesses of high status were often used as bargaining chips in diplomatic affairs, exchanged or promised in marriage to secure alliances, peace treaties, or political favors. Theodora's status as a Byzantine princess made her a particularly powerful tool in this regard. Her presence in the Ottoman court would have been a constant reminder to visit envoys that the Sultan held the key to the remnants of Byzantine power. In such negotiations, Theodora's personal desires were irrelevant. Her value lay entirely in the political leverage she provided. Despite the uncertainty of historical records, what is clear is that Theodora's captivity and potential marriage were inseparable from the broader Ottoman strategy of consolidating control over Constantinople and integrating its elite into the new imperial framework. Mehmed II's court was not simply a place of residence, it was a political theater in which every gesture and every captive served a purpose. For Theodora, this meant that her every move, every word, and every display of loyalty or compliance could be interpreted and acted upon as part of a larger game of statecraft. Survival, in this environment, required not only grace and intelligence, but also a keen understanding of the intricate balance between submission and influence. Theodora's situation also highlights the human dimension of conquest. While historians often focus on the military and political aspects of Mehmed II's victory, the personal experiences of captives like Theodora reveal the emotional and psychological toll of empire building. She was forced to navigate a new identity, one that straddled her heritage as a Byzantine princess and her imposed role as a subject of the Ottoman Sultan. This duality created a constant tension. She had to maintain her dignity and assert her status subtly while accepting the realities of captivity. Theodora's life became a delicate negotiation of power, survival, and adaptation, illustrating the profound personal consequences of geopolitical events. The question of whether Theodora was married off or retained as a high-status captive ultimately may never be resolved with certainty. Different chroniclers and historians offer conflicting accounts, and the lack of direct contemporary records complicates our understanding. Some suggest that she may have been married to a member of the Ottoman elite, thereby securing her integration and neutralizing any potential claims she might inspire among Byzantine loyalists. Others imply that she remained in the court under Mehmed's supervision without formal marriage, her presence serving as both a symbol of conquest and a tool for diplomacy. Either scenario reflects the Sultan's calculated approach, Theodora's person. Our life was subordinate to the demands of empire building, religion, politics, and cultural identity, all intersected in this period of Theodora's life. Her Christian background, Byzantine heritage, and status as a young woman made her simultaneously vulnerable and valuable. Mehmed II's court was adept at using such attributes strategically, balancing coercion and respect to achieve political goal. For Theodora, understanding these dynamics was essential. Every interaction, every display of composure could determine her treatment, influence, and even survival. Her fate, whether marriage, ceremonial integration, or diplomatic utility, was inseparable from the broader strategies of the Sultan and the shifting power structures of the region. Ultimately, the story of Princess Theodora's fate, after the fall of Constantinople, is emblematic of the broader human consequences of conquest. While empires rise and fall on the battlefield, the lives of individuals are transformed in ways that are often subtle, painful, and deeply consequential. For Theodora, the collapse of her world, her capture, and the uncertainty of marriage or diplomatic use defined a chapter of life in which survival wrecked. Wired intelligence, resilience, and an acute awareness of power dynamics, her experience reflects not only the ambitions of Mehmed II, but also the enduring complexity of human agency under the pressures of empire and history. The ambiguity surrounding Theodora's ultimate fate also serves as a reminder of the limits of historical knowledge. Chroniclers, often writing under the influence of politic, or cultural biases, left gaps in the record that modern historians must navigate carefully. What is indisputable, however, is that her captivity and potential use as a diplomatic or marital instrument highlight the intersection of gender, power, and politics in the 15th century. Theodora's life, caught between conquest and survival, illustrates the ways in which personal destiny and imperial ambition were intertwined, shaping not only her own story but the legacy of a fallen empire. In conclusion, the question of whether Theodora was married or remained a high-status captive cannot be answered definitively, yet both possibilities illuminate the strategic brilliance of Sultan Mehmed II and the precarious position of a princess caught in the currents of history. Her story is one of adaptation, negotiation, and survival, a testament to the human cost of conquest and the enduring complexities of power, politics, and personal agency in the shadow of empire. Princess Theodora's life after the fall of Constantinople serves as a vivid illustration of how rulers like Mehmed II used marriage, captivity, and diplomacy as tools to consolidate power, while the individuals subjected to these strategies had to navigate a world in which their very existence was simultaneously protected, controlled, and leveraged. The story of Princess Theodora, like the fate of many captives of fallen empires, is one that blends historical uncertainty, human resilience, and the enduring shadow of tragedy. Following her capture during the fall of Constantinople in 1453, Theodora's life was irrevocably transformed. From a young princess of the Byzantine Empire, raised amidst the marble halls, sacred icons, and ceremonial grandeur of Constantinople, she was thrust into a world dominated by the Ottoman Sultan Mehmed II. Her story, while partially obscured by the fragmentary historical record, is emblematic of the human cost of conquest, a narrative of survival, adaptation, and the weight of legacy. Their circumstances she could neither control nor predict. Theodora's later life, though not fully documented, reflects the complex intersection of political pragmatism, personal resilience, and historical symbolism. As a captive of Mehmed II, she remained a living embodiment of the Byzantine imperial line. Her presence within the Ottoman court served multiple purposes: a reminder of the empire had fallen, a symbol of the Sultan's triumph, and, potentially, a tool of diplomacy in dealings with Christian states. While there is little direct evidence regarding the specifics of her daily life, it is clear that she was kept under careful supervision and treated in a manner that balanced respect with subordination. For Theodora, survival depended on navigating the intricate social and political hierarchies of a court far different from her own. Historical accounts suggest that Theodora may have been allowed a degree of dignity within her captivity, an acknowledgement of her status as a princess, and the potential political utility she offered Mehmed II. This was a common approach in the Ottoman court. High-ranking captives were often treated with ceremony and provided with the privileges appropriate to their station, yet always under strict control. This duality, respect without freedom, was a defining feature of Theodora's experience. She existed in a space where her value was derived both from her past identity as a Byzantine princess and her current role as a political and symbolic instrument. Every interaction with the Sultan, his officials or foreign envoys carried significance, and Theodora had to navigate these encounters with intelligence, poise, and caution. Despite the political calculations surrounding her, the human reality of Theodora's situation was one of profound loss. She had witnessed the destruction of her home, the death of Emperor Constantine XI, and the disintegrati of an empire that had endured for over 1,000 years. Her family, court, and city, all of which had shaped her identity, were gone. The psychological toll of such events is difficult to quantify, but it is likely that Theodora experienced grief, fear, and the trauma of displacement. Her life, once defined by ceremonial predictability and social privilege, was now defined by uncertainty and dependency on the decisions of a conqueror. The ambiguity surrounding Theodora's later years adds a layer of poignancy to her story. Some accounts hint at her integration into the Ottoman court, possibly as a respected but controlled figure, while others suggest the possibility of her being married off or used in diplomatic negotiations. Regardless of the specifics, her life after capture illustrates the ways in which individual agency could be constrained by political realities, even for those of noble birth. Theodora's identity as a Byzantine princess was a powerful asset, but it was also a source of vulnerability, as her value was continually assessed in the context of Ottoman political objectives. Her personal experiences highlight the broader theme of female captives in medieval and modern empires. They were simultaneously protected, restricted, and exploited. Theodora's gender and noble lineage placed her at the intersection of multiple power dynamics. As a woman, she was subjected to societal expectations and courtly hierarchies that dictated behavior and access. As a princess, she was a symbol of dynastic legitimacy and political leverage. Her survival required the careful negotiation of these intersecting pressures, demanding intelligence, adaptability, and resilience. Theodora's story thus provides insight into the complex ways in which political authority, gender, and personal agency intersected in the aftermath of conquest. Theodora's legacy is also shaped by the symbolic weight of her captivity. In the eyes of contemporaries and later historians, she represented the continuity of Byzantine culture and imperial lineage, even in the face of overwhelming Ottoman power. Her presence in Mehmed II's court was a tangible reminder of the empire that had once dominated the eastern Mediterranean. This symbolic significance extended beyond her lifetime, influencing the perceptions of Byzantine heritage and the memory of Constantinople's fall for generations to come. Even as the Ottoman Empire solidified its rule over the former Byzantine territories, Theodora's story served as a link to a past that had been violently transformed. The tragedy of Theodora's life lies not only in her personal displacement and captivity, but also in the broader cultural and political loss her story represents. The fall of Constantinople was more than a military defeat. It was the dissolution of a civilization with centuries of accumulated art, literature, religious practice, and political tradition. As a princess of that world, Theodora bore witness to the destruction of her cultural inheritance. Her story embodies the human dimension of these historical forces, the suffering, uncertainty, and adaptation required to survive when an entire social and political order collapses. Yet within this tragedy lies a testament to resilience. Historical reconstruction suggests that Theodora navigated the Ottoman court with skill and awareness, maintaining her dignity and leveraging her position as best as circumstances allowed. She survived in a foreign, often hostile environment, demonstrating adaptability that ensured her continued existence despite the loss of her homeland and status. This resilience is a key aspect of her legacy, illustrating how individuals can endure and even exert influence under the most challenging conditions. Theodora's narrative also underscores the moral and human complexities of empire. While Sultan Mehmed II is often remembered for his military genius and political acumen, the stories of captives like Theodora reveal the human consequences of conquest. Theodora was caught in a system that used individuals as instruments of statecraft, where personal desires were secondary to political objectives. Her story invites reflection on the ways in which power, violence, and ambition intersect with the lives of those subjected to historical forces beyond their control. In examining Theodora's life, one also encounters the theme of historical memory. Chroniclers and historians have preserved fragments of her story, but much remains speculative. This lack of clarity highlights the fragility of historical records and the challenges of reconstructing the lived experiences of those who existed on the margins of documented events. Despite these gaps, Theodora's life has endured in historical consciousness as a symbol of the human cost of empire, the endurance of noble identity under duress, and the tragic consequences of geopolitical upheaval. The final chapter of Theodora's life, while shrouded in uncertainty, invites reflection on the interplay between survival and legacy. Her story demonstrates that even in captivity, individuals can exert a quiet influence on history by embodying the memory and continuity of a fallen world. Theodora's presence in Mehmed II's court preserved a connection to Byzantine heritage, ensuring that the empire's cultural and dynastic legacy would not be entirely erased. In this sense, her life becomes a testament to the resilience of identity and the enduring power of history to shape memory and narrative, even under conditions of profound loss. Ultimately, the tragedy and legacy of Princess Theodora lie in their inseparability. Her life was marked by displacement, uncertainty, and the shadow of conquest, yet it also reflected resilience, adaptation, and the capacity to navigate the intricate dynamics of power and survival. She bore witness to the end of an empire, and yet, through her endurance, became a living link between past and present, a human embodiment of history's continuity amid transformation. Theodora's story reminds us that the consequences of empire extend far beyond battlefields and politics. They shape lives, identities, and legacies in ways that resonate across centuries. In conclusion, the last days of Princess Theodora were defined by both tragedy and significance. Though much of her life after Constantinople remains uncertain, the historical and symbolic weight of her existence endures. She exemplifies the human cost of conquest, the precarious position of high-status captives, and the capacity of individuals to survive and retain dignity under extraordinary pressure. Through her story, we gain insight into the transformative impact of historical events on personal lives, the negotiation of identity under duress, and the enduring legacy of a princess caught between two worlds, one destroyed and one emergent under the reign of Sultan Mehmed II.